Good morning. My name is Gwendolyn Shands, and I am going to, I'm sure you probably have already read my bio, but just allow me to introduce myself. I am a former law enforcement officer of 22 years with the City of Detroit Police Department. I've done a lot of group meetings and analysis for different groups. I am Lean Six Sigma certified, and I love education. I love empowering young people to do more, to be more, to gain more. And so it's my privilege this morning to actually be here and telling you all about or talking about human trafficking, which is an issue that has just grown and it's still growing out of proportion. So this morning, the first thing that I'm going to do is talk to you or give you a definition of what human trafficking actually is. According to the DHS Center for Centering Human Trafficking, it states that human trafficking is defined as the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for labor or services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purposes of subjection to involuntary servitude, deceit, bondage, or slavery. That is quite some definition. And it's devastating when you really think about what each of those words mean and how they could affect the person who is a victim of human trafficking. Human trafficking is also referred to as the modern day slavery. The modern day slavery. And that is exactly what it is, modern day slavery. And that it affects people across the globe. It's not just located in one area. It's not just located in the United States of America, but it's all over the globe that human trafficking affects children and women and young boys. It's just not one person, one sex. However, the majority of the people that are suffering from human trafficking are young girls and women. Human trafficking is running rampant around the country. The Global Slavery Index estimates that on any given day, more than 400,000 individuals in the United States are living in conditions of modern day slavery. And not sexually, but nothing but to clean and to wash and to do those type of things. That's also a form of human trafficking. So it's prevalent all over the world, and it is happening today. It is a form of modern day slavery. And another element of human trafficking is actually getting people against their will. They don't freely go into prostitution. They don't freely go into sex trafficking. They don't freely do these things. They are violated and they are restrained from freedom that they would do and live and be like they would have looked to. And the other thing about human trafficking that really gets close to my heart is the babies, the children who become victims of human trafficking. I just recently went to Kenya, and during the trip there, we went out into the community, into the neighborhoods, where you can actually see babies just sitting on the ground in the dirt, just eating the dirt. No supervision, no parent, no nothing overseeing that child. And if I were a human trafficker, all I had to do is just walk up and get me a few babies and be gone. We have to become more aware of our surroundings, more aware of our children, more aware of what they're listening to, more aware of them being in places where they shouldn't be. So we as parents, we as individuals, we as a community, we as a society need to become more cognizant of our environment for our children and for people who might become victims of human trafficking. Conditions for human trafficking occur when, one, during a public health crisis, Next, like epidemics or highly fatal diseases, like there's some catastrophic event that might take place that would make people become more susceptible to becoming a part of human trafficking. Terrorism, war, and genocide. For example, right now, Ukraine, we're at war. People are being displaced. They're displaced from their children, their homes, their families, their form of education. So all of these things make people more susceptible to becoming victims of human trafficking because they're looking for a place to stay. They're looking for somewhere to meet those basic needs that they have and their families have. Those individuals are more susceptible to becoming part of human trafficking. Next, extreme weather events like droughts or flooding, resource scarcity. That means that you don't have enough to feed your families. You don't have enough to pay the rent. For example, some people are even selling their children into human trafficking for money in order to take care of their homes and to take care of the things that they need to have in order to survive. The next thing is existing prevalence of Black markets. There's so many Black markets out there. And even as a former law enforcement officer, those things like that are really difficult to detect. I recall one incident when my office was in the liquor license division. And in order to get to the elevator, you have to pass sex crimes. And I remember this little girl that was sitting on the chair, swinging her legs back and forth with little anklet socks on, because she had gonorrhea and they were going to the sex crimes division. So, I mean, people are just cruel and insensitive. There's some people are just, have psychological problems. How can you have sex with a 6-year-old child? But it happens every day. These Black markets support that kind of behavior. The next thing I want to talk to you about is unexpected disasters. Sometimes, and even in our lives today, we have unexpected disasters. We have death, loss, disappointments. Those are unexpected disasters that happen as no result of anything that we may have done. Unexpected disasters can leave many populations vulnerable, in particular children. When the internet, the phone, the mail communications are disrupted, that's another cause for unexpected disaster. I can't even imagine today being without my phone. I have left the house and forgot my phone and came back. And it took me 30 minutes to get back to get the phone, but I just felt naked without the phone, no form of communication. Families and friends are less able to communicate with one another. These are our lifelines, and we depend on them in order to communicate with one another. Certain individuals can become isolated, and when you become isolated, you are more vulnerable to things that might happen in your environment. Even a child who may come from a wealthy family, but is always sitting in front of a computer, just talking to whoever they want to talk to because their parents or either their caregivers don't have time for them, they too become victims of human trafficking. Families and friends are less able to communicate. Certain individuals can become isolated. Isolation is a dangerous place to be. Victims become separated from safe groups. That's another problem. And when they become separated from those people that take care of them and make them feel safe. The other day, I just had an opportunity to speak with a woman who was a victim of human trafficking. And she told me that when she was 10 years old, she was raped by 3 different people. And so when she tried to tell what happened, they said, oh, that's nothing, that's no big deal. So she said she grew up believing that it was okay for that kind of behavior to happen to her. But when she became 14 years old, she said she ran away from home. And when she ran away, she ran into somebody that was loving and kind and, fed her, gave her a place to live, bought her new clothes. And she said she thought she had arrived. And soon after all of these things took place, she began to realize when it was time to be put on the corner for prostitution, that she didn't want to do it, but she had to do it because she felt like if she didn't, that her life was on the line. But the good thing about this situation with this young woman is that her mother filed a police report of her missing. And as a consequence of that, they were looking for her and they found her standing on the corner prostituting herself. I asked her, I said, well, how did you get over that? How do you overcome a situation like that? And she told me lots of therapy. And she said at this point that she was doing well and that she also had a group to help other women who may have escaped human trafficking to become whole and to get help that they might need. So it's really devastating when you think about the different things that happen to these people as a consequence of being victims of human trafficking. Not only just victims of all trafficking is not sexual. However, 90% of it is. But then there's that 10% that isn't. But a lot of this that's going on, I think that we as a society can help eliminate or help law enforcement by just having our eyes and ears open to things that don't look right. If it doesn't look right, 9 times out of 10, it's not right. And then making those reports to the appropriate authorities for further investigation if necessary. Next. Human trafficking and medical providers. What I found is a lot of times that human traffic victims come in contact with the medical profession. If nothing, then to have a physical by a gynecologist or whatever, because they want to leave their merchandise. They want to leave that victim. They want her to be healthy so that she can go out for prostitution, pornography, illicit dating. So they take them. But a lot of times the physicians have a tendency to just do that when they need to become more aware. They need to become cognizant of what's happening. They need to recognize with their cigarettes burns all over the victim, or if they're unusually withdrawn or afraid, that's a signal, that's an indication that something may be going on with that individual. And they have an opportunity to actually talk to that person and to see if they can help them and to get more information about what's going on in their lives. Next slide, please. Victims of human trafficking. According to the United Nations Office of Drug and Crimes, victims of instability, as I forestated, are more likely to become victims of human trafficking, but not necessarily limited to. Individuals suffering from emotional or psychological problems are also more apt to become victims of human trafficking. Survivors in the wake of a disaster, as we talked about previously, may also become victims of human trafficking. Traffickers usually target individuals in need of basic survival. A lot of times it's about a need for love, a need to be hugged, a need to be touched. And a lot of these traffickers, they understand that, and they give those children or those women or those teens whatever they need in order to feel safe. And then here comes the next thing. Okay, I want you to stand out here on the corner. That is victims of human trafficking. Next, please. Human trafficking affects the underserved. Disproportionately affect underserved women and children human trafficking is estimated to be $150 billion per year industry. Can you imagine 150 billion? And I'm sure it's probably more than that, because a lot of this human trafficking doesn't even get reported. Human trafficking evade law enforcement. They just have this way of just circumventing the law enforcement. And the other thing that I think law enforcement needs to do is to put more money and resources into learning how to detect these people, these predators, before they actually start preying on these young and innocent people. They also are affected by commercial sex acts. Like I said, most of the times, and when they have a woman, if they have a child, sometimes young boys, that's where they put them. That's where the demand is that they want somebody that's babies, or they figure are pure, or who will do anything that they want them to do, or make them feel any way special. They get involved in commercial sex acts. Human trafficking is a forced labor or organization. It is an organization. Sex trafficking is a form of human trafficking. And like I said, that's just one form, is sex. However, sex seems to sell. And so that's the biggest piece of the puzzle, is sex trafficking. Minors engage in the commercial sex industry, and various illicit acts. Sex acts induced by force is illegal. You are violating my rights. It is illegal. Fraud or coercion, prostitution, pornography, and escort services are a lot of those things that the traffickers use these victims in to make tons and tons of money for them. So this is, human trafficking is forced labor, and it has various illicit acts that are involved when you're participating, or not participating, but when you're a victim of human trafficking. Next. Individual victims and survivors. Contacting the traffic hotline. Based on this information that I was able to find, it appears that human trafficking has increased. It's on the increase. It increases, seems like every year it increases. And the last statistics that I had said that it increased 20% over 2018. And that's really quite significant. And the other thing about this information is a lot of it, like I said, hasn't even been reported. So if it's saying that it's 20%, chances are it's probably twice that. It's probably 40% or greater by now, but it's on the rise. It's not on the decline. It's going in the wrong direction. And we need to begin to do more and to find out how we can help, if not eliminate it, but reduce the number of people that are involved as victims of human trafficking. Next. Well, that is the basic information that I have.
It looks like we have some time left for questions. If individuals have any, you can feel free to type them in the chat. And I'll take a look here. It seems one question came in, if you could answer it. If it is increased in recent years, how much of an increase do you think there is due to the pandemic?
That's a good question, because even when I looked at the graph, it looked like every year it increased by 20%. So if it increased by 20% each year, and this is 2022, I would say that it's increased by maybe 60 to 68%, but I don't have the exact numbers. But if you leave me the information, I will make sure that I get the exact numbers for you. But I'm sure that it is probably tripled since the pandemic and since the war in Ukraine, just the different things that have transpired in the last 2 years is probably devastating.
And there's another question in the chat from Stacy, who works with juveniles and has and a lot of the young girls seem to have no fear of being victimized. Does anyone have information on a website that she can share with them to maybe let them see the reality of this?
I don't have that information readily available. However, I can look around and find that information for you and get back to you. But as just as a former law enforcement officer, what I have found over the 22 years of my career is that there's a certain element of innocence in these people. There's a certain element of like, you know, nothing can hurt me. I'm okay. And that I can trust this person, and God is good, the world is good. And, you know, yeah, I'm gonna do this. Yes, I'm gonna go with this person. So I think that that has a lot to do with it, is they feel invincible and they're trusting. And they always say, oh, that will never happen to me. So those are some issues that we probably need to address going forward. But that's what I think, based on the information that I was able to glean from my time working the street in Detroit.
And another question, given law enforcement has a role, what about other elements of the criminal justice system? Do you have some suggestions to get them more engaged?
Yes, one of the things that I looked at and I talked about is that the health care industry, it is an industry. In particular, those who treat or examine women for gynecological exams. Those people are another person or another link in the chain that could actually give or provide more information. Because the more we have, the more we know, then we can come up with a solution, or either curtail the number of people who are actually victims of human trafficking. And those victims, those persons who are, they need to also understand that there is no negative stigma attached to that, because that's not something that they asked for. That was something that they were forced into. So I think that's another element we might need to look at. Yes.
And here's another good follow-up question. How can we get resources to those vulnerable populations if, you know, it's difficult to reach some of those targeted populations?
Oh, that's a good one. I'm just thinking recently, Ukraine, and how devastating that situation is, and the resources that have been provided to make sure as many of those people as we can possibly do get the things, the basic needs of survival. And I think it doesn't just take one organization. We have to work collectively as a team, as a group, to provide each other, not only with verbal information, but also the resources, the monetary resources that we need to further the investigation of persons who are involved in human trafficking.
And there are a couple of related questions here in the chat. One about the role of social media and how do we address the demand for these victims, as that seems to be the root of the problem. And in other words, how can we keep children safe on social media sites where traffickers hide behind fake profiles?
Well, I think that one of the things, the main thing, it begins with the parents. It begins with what you get, what you do, what you know at home. Because if we could just curtail it right there in the home, that would eliminate a lot of it. But when you sit in front of a computer all day, surfing the net, seeing what you can get into and what's out there, that's an issue. So I know that they have parameters and things in place where you can monitor the sites that your child goes to. However, are you monitoring it? So those are some real realizations. I know it's small, it's probably trivia, but just that small thing will begin to eradicate some of the problems that we're experiencing with our young people and victims who are victims of human trafficking.
Excellent. And there's a comment in the chat. These have been absolutely great questions, and it's a great conversation to start off today. We thank you so much for your time and your expertise in sharing with the group. We look forward to seeing you in the next session.
Thank you.